We're talking ghosts here on Through the Night. If you've had a spooky or supernatural experience, you can ring in and tell us about it. Eric Maple is my guest. 071 973 9733 or 071 603 1152.
Do you worry about hair loss? If you do, then we can help you. London Hair and Skin, in association with Abbey Hair Care, specialise in the many methods of treating hair loss. We are situated in a quiet and discreet location in St John's Wood and offer a relaxed environment for you to discuss your problem in the strictest of confidence. With professional care for your hair, we'd like to help you to look and feel better. So call us on 071 328 8011. That's 328 8011. We'd like to hear from you.
Late night entertainment with Therese Birch on LBC. Call 071 973 9733.
Eric Maple is my guest here on Through the Night, which means we'll be talking about ghosts, spooks, ghouls, things that go bump in the night. And if you've had any experience of those and would like to share them with us, then you can ring in now on the numbers you've heard, 071 973 9733. or 071 603 1152. Good morning to you, Eric.
Good morning.
So what's the theme? I've been talking earlier and saying Euro ghosts. Is this prompted by Maastricht at all?
Well, no, this is the second instalment of Euro ghosts.
We need a referendum.
Really a referendum. In fact, I think the whole of Europe is haunted. It haunts me at the moment.
Yes.
One thing that's rather interesting, many, many years ago, someone made a statement that you never hear of English ghosts rattling chains, and he said sardonically, that's because English people are born free. There was a cutting sent to me from a spiritualist magazine, and it says something pretty well on the same lines. It says that no longer do ghosts rattle chains, but you'll find them wearing pinstripe suits. I don't know whether that is to scare people off, but I think I prefer the chains myself.
Yes, it's not quite the same, is it?
No. But as far as Europe is concerned, a most interesting tradition, which I've gone into further. A Dutch girl once told me that when she came to ask me about ghosts, she told me that, well, to use her own words, that whenever in Holland they think of the dead, they think of England. And I just thought it was an odd sort of statement. But in fact, it's perfectly correct. There is a tradition in Holland that once a year, all the European ghosts are packed into a boat, all in their white sheets, under the captaincy of a huge ghost in white, and they just shipped to England. They're sort of psychic immigrants, and they say that, they said, was the explanation for the innumerable ghost stories that we do have in this country.
Yes, we do have a fund of them, don't we, really?
Yes, I know that it's not easy to get hold of ghosts from foreign countries in England because nobody bothers to publish them. But there's no doubt about it that people come from all over the world. I had a Japanese lady came to me some time ago, or since we were last here together, and she said she wanted to find a Japanese ghost. And I said, aren't you in the wrong country? And she said, oh no, her editor had said that England has got ghosts of every kind.
It's an interesting notion that they travel, isn't it?
Yes. Well, of course, basically they are stories. And you can find in America the same basic Anglo-Saxon ghost stories that you have here.
Yes.
But actually, by just studying the movements of ghosts, you can track population movements. It's all a bit of anthropology, I think.
Yes. Ghosts don't usually talk, do they? So one wouldn't necessarily know that they were foreign unless you heard them talk.
They say they can't speak until they're spoken to.
Oh, right.
I did hear somebody once was in constant contact with a ghost of Beethoven, and unfortunately...
Oh, was that the lady that used to write his music down? Oh,
no, I don't think it was that one. It was quite a lot of people have been in touch, and the person who was to whom the stories were being told started to speak in German, and to his horror, he found that Beethoven didn't understand it.
Well, of course, he was deaf, so he probably couldn't hear.
Of course, he was deaf, wasn't it? Yes, I don't know how you deal with a deaf ghost.
No.
I suppose sign, tap, and anyway, it'd be difficult not to be rude, wouldn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I like it's an interesting idea, isn't it, of talking in the ghost's own language, really. I was thinking of that lady who used to claim that she was writing down the music for the masters, inspired in her compositions by the likes of Mozart and Beethoven, who used to dictate their music to her. Do you remember her?
She was frequently on radio, wasn't she? The music, musically minded people told me was very good. And well, there we are. Usually, though, more commonly, the ghosts we meet aren't the illustrious kind at all.
No.
They're just ordinary grands and aunts and people who stay on a little bit before continuing the journey.
Across Europe, then, I mean, apart from us, who has the best sort of fund of ghost stories, do you reckon, Eric?
Well, I got a list of sort of typical ones. I just thought you might like to hear. I mentioned the Dutch ship. Oh, Belgium has got a good one. That is the reenactment of the Battle of Waterloo.
Good Lord.
And,
that must involve quite a few people.
Oh, yes, cannons in the sky, screams. But I don't think it's been heard lately. And I think
Due
I've
to
discovered...
cutbacks.
Cutback, what, economies?
Yes,
you mean?
yes.
Well, I suppose it could be quite a lot in there on the taxpayer, wouldn't it? Anyway, you probably have to get international approval now. But I discovered a little thing about the Battle of Waterloo, which is ghostly or ghastly. Apparently, in 1821, some years after the battle, a contractor was given the job of shifting all the skeletons, horses and men, and they were shipped to Hull in England and crushed in a bone-crushing factory and used as fertiliser.
Good Lord. Is that true?
It's true, because it came from a very early copy of a national newspaper, The Observer. It's the hero and his horse. They went back to fertilise the soil they'd fought for,
Wow.
which wasn't very cheerful for them, was it?
No, absolutely. Not very respectful either, is it?
No. Because the interesting thing that, of course, it wasn't until fairly late in history that you had proper cemeteries for the dead at all, only by the end of the 19th century.
Is that right?
Oh, yes, because you didn't have that vast number of dead. You buried them on the field of battle under a sort of pile of earth, or you buried them in the local graveyard.
Around the church?
Around the church, but we've built death into an industry nowadays.
Yes.
And so you've now got, I suppose, half Belgium is laid out very ornately with the graves of warriors.
Yes, that's right. Actually, talking about death, it's not ghosts exactly, but talking about cemeteries being a relatively new thing and death being a sort of growing industry, I suppose that once upon a time people used to look after their own dead and prepare themselves for burial and so on. So undertakers are perhaps also a relatively new business, are they? Or was it always professionals that used to come in to sort of look after the body and so on?
I don't know, but since you've raised the point, it's something, you're so ingenious. You can rewrite history on the information that comes up from here. If you've got a small village, you might have someone who did the undertaking.
Yes, someone was a midwife, perhaps, and somebody looked after the dead bodies.
There was always an old lady who did the midwifery and also laid out the dead.
Oh, right.
So I imagine that there would be somebody whose traditional duty was to do it, but it would only be part-time unless the village was in the middle of a plague. And then, unfortunately, when you did have a plague, nearly everybody fled.
Yes.
The dead were left unburied.
Yes.
Aren't we cheerful this
What a
morning?
subject for 10 minutes past
thought.
2, I know.
Yes.
In fact, there's somebody waiting to talk to you already, Eric.
Oh, yes.
On 07197397333. And it's one of our regulars on the programme, Babs, in Bermondsey. Hello there, Babs.
Hello, Therese.
Hello.
I've told this story before, but I don't think I've told it to your
To
guest.
Eric. Oh, right,
Eric.
okay.
A few years ago, I used to work in a pub in Bermondsey, and the missus of the pub said to me, would I go down to the cellar to fill the ice buckets? Well, I had 3. I'd filled one up, and then I filled the other one up. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't believe it, the ice went all over the cellar. The ice and the bucket flew out of my hands and broke. And I just stood there, absolutely terrified. I couldn't even scream or anything. And they had a dog. Excuse me. They had a dog. And he was on the stairs. and his hair all stood up, and he flew up the stairs. And I was so terrified. And the missus of the pub came down and she said, "Whatever's the matter, Babs?" And I couldn't even speak. I was so terrified that the eyes, like I said, the eyes went all over the cellar floor. The bucket went out of my hands and broke. And I just stood there absolutely petrified, because all the cellar, like a cold feeling came all over me, as I was icy cold.
It was probably the ice.
It's very odd. I've
been
heard...
down so many times before.
And this was the first time.
It had never happened.
It's very frequent when you get a haunted pub that the haunting takes place in the cellar. I've noticed that. I used to travel around a lot, and we used to visit haunted pubs and scare the people who were travelling with us on the coach. And if we could get the publican to tell the story, we would. And in nearly in every case that I can remember, it was the cellar that was haunted, and things like that. All sorts of odd things happened. Objects flew. I'm not a drinker myself, but is it related to alcohol in any conceivable way?
Well, spirits of a different kind.
Spirits of a different kind. The only one I came to at a pub, I went to a pub where it wasn't a cellar haunting. It was where the pub clock used to occasionally fall down and crash on the publican's head. He wouldn't take it away because it was a gift from his mother-in-law. He said she still remembers me occasionally. But no one knows the answer to these things. Did they tell you someone had died in the basement, in the cellar?
Well, they reckon that there was the other landlady that had it. She had 2 dogs, and she was doing the books one day, and all of us, they was up on the top floor, on the, she had a big balcony, and all of a sudden she looked, and there was this dog laying there. And when she went upstairs, she said to her husband, excuse me, she said to her husband, I can't remember the name of the dog, what was it doing down there? And her husband and her 3 daughters said, well, the dog wasn't down there, he's been up here all the time. Well, she says, when I looked round, the dog was sitting on the mat in the bar. She said, well, the dogs weren't down there, they were up here all the time.
So there was a ghostly dog down there as well?
Yes.
An extra dog?
It was I was absolutely petrified.
Did you stay there for very long?
I couldn't say a word.
Did you go back down the cellar again after that?
Never no more.
I'm not surprised.
No.
Never.
I mean, cellars can be spooky places at the best of times, but after an experience like that with the ice flying everywhere and the bucket going across the room, yeah.
And they left no clues, did they? I mean, if they didn't say somebody of an erratic nature had died down in the basement or anything like that, one is just left with a question mark.
Yes, that's right, and obviously an experience that Babs has never forgotten. Thank you for that call. Kevin is next, ringing in from the West End. Hello, Kevin.
Yeah, good morning, Therese.
Morning.
There's two things. I was in a hospital in Wiltshire, and I was half asleep. There was an older woman and 2 young girls, right? And the one came round to the side of the bed, and they were all like dirty, so I thought they were like coal miners. When I checked up with the staff, I found out that the building used to be a school, and it burnt down. And so they were, well, I'm assuming they were the survivors of, or the victims.
Victims?
Yeah.
Yes. In their original black condition. Scorched, I should think.
No, just dirty, not burnt, but just like dirty. So I thought, I couldn't work it out until somebody explained to me, and they showed me photographs of...
Well, you got clues then, hadn't you?
Afterwards,
but the point is you can able to build up the story from that. It wasn't left absolutely a mystery, that it was a haunting by people who had actually used the premises.
Well, that's what it looked like.
Had anybody else ever seen anything similar, Kevin?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't know. But, I mean, obviously you don't sort of talk about things like that, do you? But another one, this isn't really haunting, but it is a strange experience. I had this very, very vivid dream that a plane crashed on a train. And I thought, well, that's impossible. Like, the odds of that must be like, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1. But a few days later, it actually happened. It's a few years back, but it's very weird, and I don't understand it.
Well, it's not unusual. A lot of people have premonitions about an accident, a national disaster, but they don't do anything about it because they could hardly rush to the airport and say, don't let that plane depart. But they are prepared to talk about it afterwards. But the vast majority of premonitions concern ordinary daily life. You get a sudden feeling, for example, that something will happen, or somebody crosses your mind, somebody you haven't thought of for a long time.
And then the phone rings.
Oh, that's
and
the
it's
phone
them.
ring.
Yes, I know that's...
They used to have a superstition, I don't know whether they do now, that if the phone just tinkles and doesn't answer the phone and it doesn't end in a full ring, somebody is thinking of you.
Oh, right, yes.
Well, people in their ordinary lives have an amazing number of, shall we say, unexpected revelations. They have far more of them, but they not to do with ghosts, they just relate to ordinary living. Very often someone will think of an individual and then, as you say, get a phone call. Or very often someone will think of somebody they haven't seen for a long time, and I've heard of this case from a friend, and found that the individual thought of was ill at the time and was apparently thinking of the one who picked up the message.
Oh, right. So there was some sort of thought
telepathy?
transference or whatever going on, yes. Yeah. And Kevin, had you ever had any similar experiences?
Yes, I'm just about to tell you.
Yeah.
It's just yeah. When my mother died, I was quite young. Well, I was 14. And I used to love, like, laying in bed, you know, not getting up in the morning. But that morning, for some reason, I got up at 6 o'clock. I knew, just like that, like a click of the finger. And I went downstairs, I got dressed and went downstairs, and I sat there waiting for someone to come and tell me that my mother had died. And someone did come and tell me. It was an aunt, actually.
Had she been ill? Had you been expecting?
Yeah, she'd been ill, but she'd been ill for like many years and in and out of hospital. But why I knew that day or that morning, I don't know.
Well, it's not uncommon for a son to get some sense or feeling about a mother. It's not at all uncommon. But it's not a thing that people discuss, so you never hear anybody else's story other than on this sort of program. And another very common one is the mother who becomes aware that something has gone wrong in her son's life, and she just stands by waiting for the bad news, and it's very often perhaps an illness, nothing more serious than that. But there is communication between people who have a strong love relationship, a strong family relationship, in times of crisis. Sometimes you actually see the person. This is known technically as the crisis apparition.
Oh, is that right? It's got a proper name. Yeah.
Yes, the Society for Psychical Research classifies all this type of phenomena. And you and I would hardly come. Nobody would discuss his ghost stories at all. But when somebody assembles them all in one place and puts them on file, and then they look at the frequency of it, they realise the significance of it all.
Well, thank you for that call, Kevin. Sorry, was there something else?
No, just a question, really.
Yeah.
I can't work out how it happened. That's why I can't.
You can't. You never will.
No, you're not alone
You never
there, I
will.
don't think. Yes.
Most people.
Logical to me.
It's what?
It doesn't seem logical.
No.
Oh, but it is logical, isn't it? It happened.
It definitely happened.
Yes. Well, isn't that good enough?
You want a rational explanation?
I mean, you might say about yourself, according to my logic, I was never born, but you're here.
Yes, you can't remember that either.
You have to take a lot of things on trust, and later on you very often get some sort of explanation which presents the entire logic of it. You can't wrestle with the subject and get any answer out of it that way.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed for your call. We'll take a break and then more calls for Eric on 071 973 9733.
If your business depends on effective communications, come to Comics 92 at the Wembley Exhibition Centre Tuesday the 22nd to 24th of September.
It's for you.
Well, it is Europe's largest mobile communications event. Admission free with a business card.
No, it really is for you.
Oh, I see. Comics 92, Wembley. Don't miss it.
Through the Night with Therese Birch on LBC. Call 071 973 9733.
Eric Maple is here, which means we're talking about ghosts and supernatural experiences. And if you've ever come across a ghost or had a spooky experience like Kevin was telling us about, then ring in and tell us what your experience was. We'll go to John next, who's calling in from Surbiton. Hello there, John.
Oh, hello there.
Yes.
Hello. Can I speak to your guest?
Yes, Eric's listening.
Hello, good morning.
Morning. Can you just tell me something? What year is the Victorian age?
Oh, I presume it's up to the death of Victoria, isn't it? She died in 1901. I would imagine that's from 1837, wasn't it? 1901. But it sort of overlapped a bit in the sense that fashions continued if you're thinking of the appearance of someone.
Right, because I went to school in a Victorian mansion. It was like a private type of thing in Hampshire. And when I was there from about 12-ish, there was a story going around. There was a few ghosts, and one of the teachers, it was a boarding school, so he was there on the premises all the time. So he told us about these stories about ghosts, and we didn't believe him. So one time on the part of the year, it was November, when a certain moon time and the moon was out, this horse and carriage used to come up the drive. I mean, it's a very long drive. It's about half a mile drive to the actual school, on private land. It's about 66 acres. And we didn't believe him, so all of us, there's about 200 kids, we all stood outside waiting for this ghost to come past. And it actually happened. And we actually saw the ghost of the 6 horses, carriage, and 2 gentlemen on the top. And we couldn't believe it. And we actually did see it happen in front of our eyes. Now, we couldn't believe it.
Could you hear it?
Oh, yes.
You heard the hooves
going up and everything.
And the wheels?
You actually saw it in front of you. Like if you were speaking to someone like flesh, face to face, it was actually visible.
Did you check for tracks on the drive afterwards?
Oh, yeah. It was all there. Everything.
Well, supposing one suggested that it really was a
But it really was there, yes.
Oh, yeah, it definitely was there.
I remember in Leytonstone once, I was shattered to see a carriage, the Victorian type of lady and gentleman, and someone driving, going past very silently, and I just stared. I couldn't believe it. They made no sound or movement, but afterwards it turned out there was a local firm that specialised in that. But you find that one of the most frequent ghost stories you get anywhere, particularly in this country, is that of the phantom coach. It usually pays a visit to the mansion and is just before the owner of the house dies. And time and time again you come upon traditions that everybody's sitting down comfortably to dinner and with the host sort of all jolly and happy, and then suddenly they hear the wheels passing outside and he grows pale and he sometimes drops dead shortly afterwards.
I'm not surprised.
What made me, what made us all realise, because we actually saw it.
Well, yes, this is the amazing thing about it.
We actually heard the hooves and everything, and someone blowing a trumpet type of thing.
Was he
And it was
blowing
all
the
foggy.
trumpet.
It was all foggy.
You could hear something as well,
Oh,
could
yeah.
you? This sounds very realistic, doesn't it, Eric?
It sounds a real one, wouldn't it? The trumpet and everything.
Yes.
Most of them, there's a wide variety. Very often the coach is pulled by headless horses.
How do they see where they're going, Eric?
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. They'll vanish shortly afterwards. And the driver is usually headless as well.
Yes.
And in some ghastly stories, a skeleton is sitting inside, and as he passes, the arm goes out, picks you up, and
Grabs
you go
you.
on the journey with them.
Oh, my God.
But I've met quite a number of people over the years who say, don't laugh, I have heard the wheels of the phantom coach passing, one at Wanstead where I live, passing down the old road to the manor house. The manor house hasn't been there for over 100 years.
Right, we will press on to Anne next, who's calling us from Fulham. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the theory of the gentleman who said, why does this happen? And I've often thought about it. I've had several experiences of what I would call extrasensory perception, and I've tried from the time I was young to suppress it because it's rather disturbing to have it affect you, and I'd rather not know about these things. But sometimes you can't help it. And I relate it to our relationship with our animal ancestors in that, well, I've been in San Francisco on many occasions, and my daughter who lives there tells me that before they are having any quakes, the animals always sense it somehow. Now that whether it's something in the ground or the movement of the air, but the birds become silent, etc. Well, I feel that we had a gift like this of communication with each other long before we developed our intricate patterns of speech, and that at one time, man, probably in a tribe, could just look at each other and sense fear or sense danger, and we lost that when we became so complicated with our music and our noise and our problems, etc. And I think we could all develop extrasensory perception to a greater degree if we so chose to do, and if we had the time. Now, that probably isn't exactly related to seeing ghosts, but I think if we knew more about it, it could be assumed to be related to seeing ghosts, because it could be just an extra dimension of communication of some kind. And I do believe that we will maybe someday be able to fathom more about it. I can tell you I've had numerous of these experiences, and I'll just tell you of a couple of them if you'd like to hear of them, about them. I was sitting very quietly in the evening, just reading in my living room, and I got this overwhelming feeling. It was very quiet, just early evening, maybe 9 or 10. Just like a sentence in my head. The house next door is being burgled. Now, I thought, this is silly, and I kept reading, and again this came, the house next door is being... Well, of course, I got up, and I looked through my kitchen window, which overlooks their back garden. It was all dark and everything. I didn't see anything, and I went back, but again, it was so overwhelming that I took my dog and put her on the lead and went downstairs and next door, and there in the living room, they had opened the window to the living room. I'd been upstairs reading, and at the back of the house, and this was down in the front, the window was open, and there were two youngsters about 11 and 12, and they'd gone through the entire house, and they'd piled in the living room what they thought were goodies, you know, transistor radios and various things and so forth. And foolishly, without even thinking, I tried the door, and of course the door was locked. They'd come in through the back, and when they heard me try the door, of course they ran out through the back, and then the people weren't home, and I was I called the mother of the girl who lived there, and they had gone away without telling me. They were up in Wales, and they came down. Well, fortunately, nothing was taken because I disturbed them. But why? The only thing I tried to analyze that, and I thought these two children were so excited, and their thoughts were, it was so exciting to them to do this, and they were finding all these things and piling them up downstairs in this room, that these were very strong thoughts, and they came over to me, and I was sitting quietly and reading, and the thoughts came. That's the only explanation I can get for that.
Well, perhaps there's another. You mentioned the animals betraying the fact that an earthquake was about to take place. Well, I believe they actually have a special watch in California, watching animals, because they react to any earth tremor. They're very sensitive. But the point you make about certain individuals having these qualities and perceptions could be explained by the fact that we, in the kind of world we live, we haven't any room for that sort of activity. The faculties are all dulled, and only in special occasions do they assert themselves. You've noticed if you find any seer or spiritual leader, this person will withdraw completely. They used to sit on hilltops and mountain tops, so that their natural faculties wouldn't be impaired in any way, from which they would descend and announce their prophecies.
Yes, it's an interesting theory that in a way our senses are dulled because of the fact that we have so many other things to deal with, I guess, just in everyday life.
Well, they're all there, and it could be that primitive people had a better sense of communication. I knew a man who spent many times a long time in South Africa, and he said that one day his servant said, "My father has died. I want to go to his funeral." And he said, "Well, when did you hear?" He said, "I just know." He knew his father had died, and there was no sort of outward explanation for this. And he told me that the native peoples very often had this faculty and took it for granted. They wouldn't have regarded it as outstanding at all.
And thank you for your call. We'll take a break and then more calls for Eric Maple. We're talking ghosts here on Through the Night on LBC.
Keep your FM dial on 97.3. Angela Rippon will bring you news, comment and analysis on all the day's main events. That's weekday afternoons from 4 till 7 on LBC News Talk.
Through the Night with Therese Birch on LBC. Call 071 973.
Eric May talking about ghosts and ghost stories. Rosemary of Bromley is on the line next. Hello, Rosemary. Are you there, Rosemary? No, sounds as though Rosemary has disappeared from her phone. Perhaps it was all an apparition. We'll try Paul next. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, Therese.
Good morning.
And Eric. This is pretty good evidence for the survival. Actually happened to my ex-wife some years ago. She was in Soho Hospital for women awaiting an operation to have a hysterectomy. And she had the pre-med, and unfortunately for her, her operation was delayed by some emergency cases coming in, so she continued to lay rather drowsily in the ward, and she knew there shouldn't be any visitors for her at that time, and suddenly she was aware of a dark-haired woman in the old-fashioned wrap-over type of apron, and she was going to say to her, "Oh, you shouldn't be here," and she looked to the end of the ward to call help, and when she looked back, the person had gone, although she'd smiled at her very nicely. Some years later, my wife and I, at the time, were on a visit to my older sister, and we were talking about my mother. Now, my wife had never seen my mother before the age of about 62, when she was well and truly grey, and had been for many years. And in talking about Mother, and we've talked about her keeping her old rent books and things like that, she said, oh, I've got them here. She said, I'll show you. And in going through the various things that Mother had had, an old photograph came up from my mother when she was around 40, around that age. And she had me when she was 43, by the way. And this dark-haired woman was standing there in the wrap-over apron. Now, my wife had never seen that photograph, and she said, oh, my goodness, she said, that's the woman who visited me when I was in hospital waiting my operation. And that was quite interesting.
Well, it is. It fits in with so many similar experiences, but no experience is quite the same. In this case, the sort of evidence became obvious once you got this other information.
Yes.
But the idea of, first of all, a person being in a semi-coma or drowsy or half asleep, and then seeing an apparition is understandable in view of the discussion we were having with the lady just previous. The idea is that your acute consciousness is suppressed.
Yes, yes.
And the other is, and it's not at all an unfamiliar story, that if somebody distinctly related to the family is present during an illness.
Yes.
And I've come upon stories time and time again from women who say very briefly that while ill and sleeping in a separate room from their husband while they were ill, they actually saw a figure of a woman watching them or sitting by the bed.
Yes.
It's a pleasing thought, though, isn't it?
It certainly is.
There's nothing frightening at all.
Absolutely. It was wonderful, because she'd never seen my mother as a dark-haired woman at all, so it wasn't a case of her looking and remembering or anything like that. It was definitely a whole new thing for her to see. And of course, years later, when we went through this box, there came the photograph, and she said, my goodness, that's the woman I saw in hospital. It was wonderful.
It's a unique story, because you've got the whole story there, haven't you?
Paul,
Complete.
thank you very much
complete.
indeed. Yes, that was super. Ellen next, ringing in from Streatham. Hello there, Ellen.
Hello, Therese. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I worked in an old people's home in Norwood, and I was putting this chap to bed. He wasn't very old, but he'd two wooden legs, and I was getting them off him, helping him into bed. So it was about 9 o'clock at night. It was winter, dark winter's night, and I heard these like pebbles getting thrown into the room. And he said, oh my God, what's that? Well, I got stiff. I said, God bless him, and I blessed myself, So it happened again. The same pebbles into the room, like thrown into this air room where we were.
You actually could see pebbles,
No, you couldn't see them, but you could hear them getting thrown into the room, So the next morning, we're all in the staff room, and I said, oh my God, something happened to me funny down in that room last night, down in the end room. So this girl, Mary, said, I know what it is, she said. It happened to me. She said, was the pebbles thrown into the room? I said, yes. She said, twice. I said, yes. She said, that happened to me. The same thing happened to me. Well, the same thing happened to my mother years ago in Dublin. Her and her friend were standing in this doorway, both kissing two fellas good night, I don't know. Anyway, the same thing happened. There was pebbles thrown down the stairs. And the next morning, there was nothing on the stairs. Not funny.
And did you ever get an explanation as to why something should have been happening in that room?
No, never.
But somebody else had experienced exactly the same thing. How weird.
The same thing.
I've never heard of that. The closest, and it's probably unrelated, is the Irish belief in many places that you must throw a pebble onto the side of the road, and quite a heap of pebbles eventually materialise to protect you against dangers on the way. But that isn't probably the answer to this one, but it is related to Ireland and older customs. Were they through an open window?
It wasn't through a window. It was like through the... I was at the window. I was at the window, because Peter's bed was at the window.
Oh, I see.
And we heard them like getting thrown into the door, into the room.
From the doorway.
From the doorway.
Well, it is
Mystifying.
unusual, but some interesting stories come out of Ireland. And, I mean, I knew a man who actually was present who insisted that he heard the banshee.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. A little woman shrieking and groaning and shrieking outside the house. He said, I sweated because I knew someone was going to die.
Is that what a visit from the banshee
Yes, the banshee
heralds, then?
It's old Scottish families and old Irish families. And he was telling me this as he drove his car, and I found myself coming into a cold sweat. It was so dramatic.
Yes.
Because he said, we knew what would happen, and in the morning we went to see Granny and she was dead. Oh, it was a nice cheerful thought. This was told me in the dark as we went home.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And what's this business of putting a pebble on the roadside, then?
Well, I don't quite know. Dublin has a large kept record over many, many years of unusual phenomena. And as a matter of fact, long before there was any possibility of starting some sort of establishment, they just kept the records. And I discovered that it was in a child's handwriting, and a child had described what was happening on the way to her school. And there was this pile of white pebbles, and people as they passed threw stones onto them. And it was only about a year ago I discovered that it was done for luck or to ward off evil, and it still takes place in out-of-the-way Irish places. If you go to Ireland, they're a little closer, a little more fey than we are, I think, as the Isles of Scotland are. There you'll find customs and traditions and beliefs that were like ours several centuries ago.
All right, on to our next caller, and it's Jeff in Camberwell now. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Therese.
Yes.
First-time caller, so I'm a bit, on edge.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're all on edge listening to Eric and his ghost stories.
Well,
I'm on edge too.
I'd love to talk to Eric if I may.
Yeah.
Well, it is. I'm an old people's warden. The thing is, I was given a typewriter about 3-4 months ago by a relative of a person that had died. Now, they just gave it to me. Would you like it, Jeff? Put it in your office, blah, 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 So I took this typewriter in, and every couple of weeks I could be laying in bed and I could hear it typing. I put it in the living room, actually, and I could be laying in the bedroom and I can hear this thing typing. And I've been petrified. I don't know what to do with it. I don't have to throw it away or give it to someone or whatever,
Have you tried leaving it with a piece of blank paper in it?
No, I haven't really, no. I haven't really. I mean, I'm not well into these sort of things, I'm quite a level-headed sort of chap. And there's nobody in the house at all, so nobody could be playing about with it,
There's been a lot of, I've come upon lots of stories or cases in the past, not recently, of people who were very wary of buying any antiques because there might be some association with the original owner and it might not be a happy one.
Oh, I see.
But you've got a frustrated author, haven't you?
I believe I have. This chap, he did write short stories.
Oh.
And they gave it to me because they said, look, Jeff, you're a warden, perhaps you could type letters with it and so on and so forth, And they've given it to me, and I didn't like to say no. And I put it in the living room, in memory of this chap. And it does, every couple of weeks, it will start typing things out.
Well, I think you ought to leave some blank paper in it, Jeff, and see what happens.
Yeah.
He might be writing a bestseller, and you could then...
Well, it frightens me, really.
I've heard of ghosts...
I could be, laying in bed, I think, my God, it's off again.
I've got something to frighten you more.
Yes.
You see, you type a message saying...
Who are you?
Who are you? And then, where are you? What are you? And then you find it...
replies to you on the same piece
of
paper.
That would really frighten me, yeah. What do you suggest that I do with it? Do you think I should
Well, I
give it
think,
one?
personally, I think it's a most remarkable typewriter. I mean, if you just accept the fact that you're going to get messages, and nobody can write anymore, can they? I mean, people have had art of handwriting is gone. Typewriter, what else do they use? What is the latest?
Word processor.
Word processor. Yes, I should regard this as a very precious experience.
Really?
Yes, why not?
It does, it's quite frightening.
Yes,
you can be sort of laying around, oh my God, it's off. It goes for about 20 minutes, know.
Well, I think he must be frustrated that you haven't left any paper out for him.
I think I'll try that, Therese, and ring you back and let you know what
Well,
happened.
yes, you must. Please report back if you get any messages.
And yes, it'd be lovely to translate those and discuss them, wouldn't
Yes,
it?
well, terrific. Right, on to our next caller then. It's Francis in Iverheath. Hello, Francis.
Hello, Teresa.
Yes.
I was listening into it at LBC and I heard Kevin talking about his dream.
Mm.
And could I speak to your guest?
Yes, Eric's listening.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, I don't dream a lot at all. But this morning, I've been listening to LBC all night and I must have dropped off to sleep about 6 o'clock. I woke up and I must have gone off again. And I had this feeling. I was walking with another girl who I don't know down this street. I went into this hall, and right in front of me was my husband's sister, brother-in-law, and the nieces, and they were all in black. And there was a man there, and somebody called Jim, and he turned, and I nearly fainted because it was my husband, and he was in a beautiful grey suit, which is a thing he never wore. But he stood and he stared at me, and he started to walk towards me, and I don't know why, but I just run. I ran out of this hall and up a road. I don't know where I was. I haven't a clue. But you know those milestones that have the numbers with the miles on them? Mm-hmm. I sat on one of them, and I was sort of crying, and I sort of come to myself. Although I was dreaming, I seemed to be awake all the time. But it was so vivid because my husband, and funny enough, my husband died last year.
How close to the death
it's been spooking me all day.
What was the sort of time gap between the dream and your husband's death?
My husband died last year in May.
And when did you have the dream?
Yesterday morning.
Oh, right.
Oh, I see.
Well, we don't claim to be dream experts. We're really into ghosts here, aren't we, Eric?
It's so
yes.
spooky.
But there is no doubt about it that experiences come in many forms. Dreams, waking dreams, ideas and just little mental pictures. But it was definitely a scene relating to a funeral, wasn't it? Everybody was in black.
Because he seemed to walk toward...
Quite an interesting one, actually. And this comes from a lady who I know exceedingly well. She's now well into her 80s. And she used to be a nursing sister in one of the big London hospitals. She came from very wealthy and very well-known family. And therefore, as a nurse, at the time she was a nurse, it was frowned upon. Her father was extremely mean with her mother. And this lady, old as she is now, I'm being rather cautious how I say this because she's still alive and I wouldn't want her to think I was betraying something which she had
of course not.
told me. But she had saved some money in order to go to a New Year's Eve dance. And of course, people, when they go to, I don't know, they do go to dances now, they go to discos, don't they? But, you know, when you and I, sir, were younger, the ladies used to go to dances, they wore long dresses and they had special evening purses to take with them. And she had kept the money that she'd saved. It was £1, 2 10-shilling notes, and she put them in the purse in her chest of drawers. And in the morning, when she was due to go to the dance, she quite deliberately looked in the purse, and the money was gone. Now,
had anybody else access?
No, wait a minute. Hold on, because this is where the story comes to its crunch. Her mother died 6 years afterwards. They never found out where the money went to. Yes, they had servants in the house. They were all questioned. Her father, was, to put it mildly, was a miserable old devil. But everybody was questioned. Of course, everybody was under suspicion. Her mother, they never found out where it went. It went, so she couldn't go to the dance. And for a nurse, you know, the opportunity to go out for an evening in those days, I mean, going back sort of 65, 70 years ago, was something really rather special, and she'd been looking forward to it. However, her mother died, and on the day of the night of the funeral,
this lady was in her bed, and she suddenly woke up and saw her mother standing at the foot of her bed. And she said it was quite apparent that she was crying. And she took her handkerchief out from inside her cuff and dabbed her eyes, and then pointed to a drawer in the chest of drawers and disappeared. And this old lady, as she is now, out of sheer curiosity, got up. She said she wasn't frightened. She got up, put a light on. She was then, in her early 30s. She put a light on and went to the chest of drawers and opened, because while she was standing at the foot of her bed, the chest of drawers was behind her, and she pointed deliberately to a particular drawer. And she opened the drawer, and on the top of the clothes in there was the purse, this little bag, which she would have taken with her to the dance.
All that time before?
She opened it, and there were 2 10-shilling notes in there.
I thought you were going to say there'd be an IOU.
No. There were 2 10-shilling notes in there. She said it was, I've often heard her tell this story, and used to tell it to my children when they were little, but it's absolutely true. And she said for years she continued to live in the house, and she thought, I don't want that purse, and she threw it out. And about a week later she opened the drawer, and the purse was back there. It didn't matter what she did, she could not get it out of that drawer. And she got married and moved, and the chest of drawers moved with her. She still has the chest of drawers. The purse is still in it. And my children, for a joke one day, when they were staying there, actually moved the purse and took it downstairs and put it in the sideboard. When they went backstairs when they went the next morning, because they thought this was a great joke against this particular lady, when they went there the following morning, and they opened the sideboard cupboard, and it wasn't there. And this old lady was still upstairs in bed. They went upstairs to the chest of drawers, and it's back in the drawer.
Wonderful stuff.
This is beyond my limited powers of elucidation.
Wonderful story.
I'm always losing things.
Yes.
But the point is that my glasses, I always put them in the wrong place, but there's no system, and it's somebody of the family who said, here you are, you lost them again. I don't know the answer to that, but I must say that you have a very hectic family life, don't you? And at Christmas time it must be tremendous fun, find the money.
Hunt the purse, yes.
Find the purse.
We've just got a couple of minutes left for the news. Just a mention of our general knowledge quiz after the news. If you want to book a place now, you can ring in on 071 603 1152. But now another story from Louise in the Barbican. Hello, Louise.
Hello. And I'm quite often going to have my fortune told to an old lady in Romford. And one day she was moved from a slummy part of Romford to a new block of flats. And it was built on an old plague burial pit. And she said she woke up one night and there were all men sitting round her bed. And they said, we were buried with our eyes open. Would you close our eyes for us?
Oh, my God.
That's,
Did she?
Well, she said yes. I said, what? I mean, I was too petrified to talk. I said, what did you do? She said, I just closed their eyes for them and they went away.
This is interesting because it was traditional that you always laid coins on the eyes of the dead. One explanation was that you wouldn't want their eyes to follow you because they really would try to lure you to death themselves.
Well, if you didn't close their eyes quickly, they would stay open, wouldn't they, with rigor mortis, I suppose?
Yes.
And the way they buried them quickly, they wouldn't have time to close, or they wouldn't want to touch them, would
Not
they?
in plague pits, no, that's right.
And, threw them into... Very often you weren't dead when they threw you into the hole,
Really?
But
that's a really
interesting
spooky
because
tale.
it's
But did you know all the people that robbed the dead, how they, when they were caught, they said, well, why didn't you catch the plague? And they had garlic and herbs all hung round their neck.
Oh, there's some horrible things. During the plague, people who'd got it were shut into their houses with a big cross on the outside.
Yes.
And now they'd got it, what they used to do is to grab at any person who was passing, saying, well, if I've got it, now you've got it. And human nature is very, shall we say, odd under pressure, isn't it? Well, it's a lovely story. I don't live far from Romford, but I must say some things go on there. Yes, truly. I believe they're closing the brewery as well, aren't they?
Yes, that'll put a stop to stories like that. We've got to leave it there, Eric, sadly. Yeah, the clock has beaten us. It's gone really quickly, hasn't it?
It has. It's been very entertaining for me.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I hope we'll see you again before long here on Through the Night. And thanks to everybody who's rung in. Don't forget, after 3, it's our general knowledge quiz. 071 1152 or 071 973 9733 to book your place.